The first challenge this week, the first pause the video moment, is to read Philippians4:10-20 and try and summarise in a single sentence what you think Paul is trying to do here. It is a bit hard to tell on first reading, isn't it? Is this Paul saying thanks for the gift? Is he sort of hinting that it took a long time coming? Does he want them to send more? Is he saying they shouldn't have? There was no need? What we'll do today is look at some other passages that help to explain what Paul is and isn't doing here and why, and then we'll come back to Philippians 4. First, let's read 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verses 1 to 18. I'll just wait here while you do that. Welcome back. So you get a good idea from verses 3 to 6 of the kind of support that an apostle like Paul was entitled to receive from the churches that he served. And from verses 7 to 10 you get an understanding of the godly common sense behind this from the point of view of the churches themselves. Basically, in our relationship with God's world as a whole, it just won't do for us to be trying to get what we want without paying for it. You want national security? Pay your soldiers. You want cared for sheep? Look after your shepherd. You want bread? Feed the ox that treads the grain. And you want good, sound Christian leadership? Then put your hand in your pocket and invest in it. Give people time and space to give their full attention to the work without having to wonder how they can also provide for themselves and their families. So far, so clear. But Paul has waived his rights to such support from the Corinthians. Why? Well, it isn't, if you look at verses 13 and 14, because he isn't entitled to it, nor because it would be unspiritual of him somehow to accept such help. Look at verse 14. The Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should receive their living from the gospel. The reason is given in verse 12 and amplified in verses 15 to 18. The main aim of Paul's life is to preach the gospel, not to make money. If waiving his right to financial support is going to put him in a better position to communicate the gospel, then that's what he'll do. The need to earn a living as a tent maker, we know this from Acts 18 verse 3, might mean that he has less freedom with his time, but it will also mean that he has more freedom to say effectively whatever needs to be said. Pause the video for a moment and compare the advantages and disadvantages for the churches of having paid or unpaid ministers. Which is better for the church and why? Welcome back. You get further insight into Paul's approach to money from 1 Timothy 6, verses 3 to 10. Shall I just wait here while you read it? A few things to notice. A few things that show Paul's thinking out of Paul's great experience. For instance, verses 3 to 5, the link between loving money and stirring controversy as a Christian leader. If what you really want is to get rich from your gifts, you need to distinguish yourself against the competition, the other ministers around. So you'll be looking for controversies which show how you're right and they're wrong. What is the defence against this danger? Well, the leader should cultivate contentment, verse 6, based upon who he really is, verse 7, and what he really needs, verse 8, and be mindful of the danger that has made so many people in the past wander from the faith, verses 9 and 10. Pause the video again at this point and jot down what makes contentment grow in us and what makes it shrink. Welcome back. Let's link this to one more passage. This time it's Luke chapter 16 verses 10 to 15. Take a moment to read that. Notice the difference in perspective between heaven and earth on the subject of money. For us, it can seem like such a big deal. For God it is really very little. See verses 10 and 11. For us it looks like ours, it's our property. In reality, it's his property which we are looking after. Verse 12. Jesus is quite clear that we will have to make a choice between the way the world sees this and the way God knows it. And then look at verses 14 and 15. The Pharisees loved money, and it immediately affected their relationship with Jesus when he challenged them on this. And Paul was once a Pharisee. Our own attitude to wealth carries exactly the same potential as a stumbling block. Note that being able to justify our earnings or lifestyle to other people is no help at all when confronted by a God who knows our hearts. Before we move on, why not pause the video again and think about the difference between living with money as a big deal that belongs to me and living with it as a little thing that belongs to him which he's entrusted to me. What difference does it make? And for the final time, welcome back. Now let's go back to Philippians 4. By now we can understand why Paul wants to get this right. He wants to encourage the love that prompted them to send him some money without encouraging them to send any more. They've sent money, and he's acknowledging that, not quite saying thank you for it. But it's not the money he's rejoicing at, but in the Lord he's rejoicing, verse 10, at their renewed concern for him. He isn't, verses 11 to 13, rejoicing because he is or was in need. He emphasises that he's not. He tells them quite explicitly that they really do owe him nothing. Verse 18 says that. At the same time, it was a good thing that they did, verses 14 to 17. Their gifts are a fragrant offering, pleasing, you notice, to God. Well, of course, because whatever you do to and for the servant, you are doing to and for the master. See Matthew 10, verses 40 to 42, and Acts 9, verses 3 to 5. He wants to encourage their love while making clear no need for further gifts. For Paul, where questions of money are involved, it is worth taking trouble to get the relationship right. For us too, yeah?